Imagine a world with no cities, no writing, no laws, no money. It's a world without history itself, because no one can record it. Now, imagine one civilization inventing all of that, and then vanishing so completely that for thousands of years, humanity forgot it ever existed. This isn't a fantasy story. This is the real story of Sumer, the first known civilization in human history. Born over 6,000 years ago, it rose from the dust between two rivers, and then was buried again beneath the sands of what is now modern-day Iraq. And here's the twist. Sumer didn't fall to some great, singular enemy. It collapsed because civilization itself, the very thing it created, came at a price. A price we are still paying today. Our story begins around 4500 BC in southern Mesopotamia, a land cradled between two legendary rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. This region is famously called the Fertile Crescent, but don't let that name fool you. The reality was harsh, unpredictable, and downright dangerous. The rivers flooded without warning, wiping everything away. The land was flat and open, with no mountains or forests to offer natural defense against invaders. It was a place where survival was a daily struggle. Yet, in this hostile environment, the Sumerians did something truly revolutionary. They didn't just adapt to nature, they took control of it. They dug a complex network of irrigation canals, redirecting the unpredictable river water to their fields. This single innovation transformed the dry, dusty plains into lush, reliable farmland. And with that, everything changed. For the first time in human history, people could produce more food than they needed to survive. This is called a surplus. And a food surplus is the spark that ignites civilization. It meant not everyone had to be a farmer anymore. Some people could become artisans, priests, soldiers, or builders. And all these people needed a place to live and work together. This led to the greatest Sumerian invention of all, the city. They built the first true cities in history, names that echo from the dawn of time: Uruk, Lagash, Eridu. These weren't just overgrown villages, they were sprawling urban centers with tens of thousands of people. By 3000 BC, the city of Uruk may have had up to 50,000 residents, making it the largest, most complex city on Earth. But as these cities grew, so did the problems. With thousands of people living together, new questions arose. Who owns this plot of land? How do we keep track of who owes who? Who is responsible for managing the grain stored for the winter? The old ways of remembering things in a small tribe just wouldn't work anymore. The Sumerians needed a new tool and new technology to manage this complexity. And their solution was one of the most radical, game-changing inventions ever: writing. They developed a system called Cuneiform, using reed styluses to press wood-shaped marks into wet clay tablets. Once baked in the sun, these tablets became permanent records. But the first stories they wrote weren't epic poems or sacred texts. They were accounting spreadsheets. The oldest written texts we've ever found are receipts, contracts, and inventory lists. It was the birth of bureaucracy. Here's a fun fact: the oldest recorded customer complaint in history comes from Sumer. A clay tablet from around 1750 BC records a man named Nani angrily accusing a merchant of selling him low-quality copper ingots and being rude to his messenger. Even back then, customer service was an issue. This wasn't just about keeping records. This was the birth of historical memory. From this point on, humanity could write its own story. History, as we know it, begins here, on a Sumerian clay tablet. Of course, life wasn't all about trade and taxes. The Sumerians had a rich spiritual world, but it was a deeply pessimistic one. They saw the universe as a chaotic and dangerous place, ruled by powerful, unpredictable gods who were not necessarily loving or kind. Each city had its own patron deity. There was Anu, the distant god of the sky, Enlil, the powerful god of wind and authority, and the famous Inanna, the complex goddess of love, beauty, and war. To honor these formidable gods, the Sumerians built incredible structures called ziggurats. These were massive, step temples that towered over the city skylines, acting as a staircase between the heavens and earth. They weren't places for the public to gather and worship, but were believed to be the literal homes for the gods when they visited Earth. In fact, the famous biblical story of the Tower of Babel was almost certainly inspired by the site of a magnificent Babylonian ziggurat, a direct descendant of Sumerian design. In the beginning, Sumerian cities were ruled by priest-kings, men who claimed their authority came directly from the gods. They were both the spiritual and political leaders. But as cities grew wealthier, they became targets. The constant rivalry between these city-states for land, water, and trade routes meant that power soon shifted from the temple to the barracks. Military leaders rose to prominence. This led to another set of firsts: the first organized armies, the first city walls for defense, and the first professional soldiers. Civilization was becoming more structured, but also more violent and fragile. It was also during this period that the concept of formal law began to take shape. Later, more famous legal codes, like the Code of Hammurabi from Babylon, were built directly upon Sumerian legal traditions that established rules for property rights, marriage contracts, and punishments for crimes. For centuries, Sumer was a patchwork of competing city-states. But around 2300 BC, a man named Sargon of Akkad did something no one had ever done before. He wasn't Sumerian, but he saw their internal conflicts as an opportunity. He conquered the Sumerian cities one by one and forged them into the world as first empire, the Akkadian Empire. Sargon was a brilliant ruler. He didn't destroy Sumerian culture, he adopted it. The Akkadians used the Cuneiform script for their own language and kept Sumerian as the language of religion and learning. So even after the Sumerians lost their political independence, their ideas, their writing, and their religion survived and spread. But beneath the surface, the foundations of their world were cracking. The fall of Sumer wasn't a single, dramatic event. It was a slow, grinding collapse, driven by three powerful forces that fed off each other. First, there was environmental collapse. The very irrigation that gave them life slowly poisoned their land. As water evaporated from the fields year after year, it left behind salt in the soil. This process, called salinization, gradually made the land less fertile. Crop yields plummeted. They had to switch from growing wheat, which is less salt-tolerant, to barley. Eventually, even the barley struggled to grow. The breadbasket of the ancient world was turning into a barren wasteland. Second, there was constant warfare. The endless fighting between the city-states drained their resources, manpower, and wealth. Generations of young men were lost in pointless conflicts. They were so focused on fighting each other that they failed to unite against common threats from the outside. And that leads to the third factor: invasions. Weakened from within, Sumer became vulnerable. Nomadic tribes, like the Cushians and later the Amorites, swept in from the surrounding hills and deserts, raiding and eventually conquering the dying cities. Finally, the rising Tower of Babylon to the north delivered the final blow. By 2000 BC, the great Sumerian cities were either abandoned ruins being swallowed by the desert, or they were absorbed into the new empires that followed. The Sumerian language itself died out as a spoken tongue, surviving only in temples and scribal schools, much like Latin in the Middle Ages. For nearly 4,000 years, their memory was lost to the world. And yet, look around you. Almost everything that defines our modern civilization began here. The city you live in. The laws that govern you. The contracts you sign. The idea of schools, of writing down history, of organized religion, it all started in Sumer. You are, in a very real sense, living in a world designed by a people you may have never even heard of. Here's one final thought from the Sumerians. They believed that after death, everyone good or bad, king or peasant, went to the same dark, gloomy underworld. There was no heaven, no eternal reward. This made them believe that life on earth was incredibly precious, precisely because it was so brief and all they had. The story of Sumer proves a powerful and timeless lesson. Civilization doesn't collapse because people are evil or because of one single catastrophe. It collapses when its complex systems, environmental, political, and social, grow faster than the wisdom needed to manage them. It's a lesson history has been trying to teach us ever since. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey back to the dawn of history fascinating, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories about the worlds we've lost and the lessons they still hold for us today.